Here's all the spells in the Lore of Shadows and how to use them. First up, Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. A direct damage spell with a little speed debuff as well, only costs 6 winds of magic, lasts for 13 seconds, and you can overcast it for an extra 3 winds of magic to extend the cast range, but honestly I would say this is mostly pointless. Just move closer or wait for the enemy to move closer. It's not the kind of powerful spell that you really desperately should need to cast. Now on the unit card it says it's strong versus units with 25 or more men, so that's pretty much infantry and cavalry, and being a direct damage spell it doesn't worry about armor, so you don't have to think about that when using this spell. And if we look at how much damage it's done to these Jade Lancers by the time it's finished and before they get into my caster, and we can see they've lost about 1/5 of their health, so not too shabby at all. But that's against cavalry, who have a slightly smaller health pool as they only have 60 men, as opposed to infantry here, which has 120. And by the time the spell is finished here against Celestial Dragon Guard and some Jade Warriors, you can see it looks like a little less damage because it's maybe like 1/6 of their health, but it's just because they have a bigger health bar, it looks like less. It's pretty much about the same damage. And if we look at the damage value the wizards have gained from their one spell, the one that did it on the Jade Warriors, only 76 damage value, whereas the one that did it on Celestial Dragon Guard, 138, and the other wizard against the cavalry, 145. So pretty close between those two, but obviously the more expensive targets is where you're going to get more of a return on this spell. So quite simply, to use it effectively, just look for the most expensive infantry or cavalry in the enemy army and just spam this away at them if you want to. If you're new to the game and you find magic hard to manage, this can be an easy spell to use. Just find that expensive unit and keep using it on it over and over again. It's got a quick cooldown, like 30 seconds, but you'll be getting guaranteed damage, so no chance of messing it up. So at the start of the battle, just scour the enemy army, look for their strongest units. Here we've got Way Watchers, we've got Wild Rider Cavalry, we've got the Great Stag Cavalry. Any of these 3 units is a good target for this spell. It's not really going to outright kill any of the models, but it'll weaken them so that when they get into melee with anything, some models will just pretty much instantly die. For example, dropping Melkoths on this Way Watcher unit here, the spell's just finished, but all 60 of the elves are alive until I bring in this Centaur charge, and we can watch their numbers drop from 60 to about 40 in the space of 5 seconds. So it's good for weakening the units, but you do need something to finish it off. If you're just going to drop the spell on a missile unit and then not really touch that missile unit, it's still going to be operating at full missile damage power, so better off going for melee units unless you can attack the missile unit at the same time. And of course there is the speed debuff as well, but I don't think there's going to be much practical use to just putting this on one unit for the most part, so I wouldn't really think about using this spell in terms of the speed debuff. Although it might help you catch faster units like Skirmish Cav, or just allow you a little bit of extra time if you want to shoot the unit that you've casted on. So yeah, very simple, just drop this on the powerful units. If you don't know how to identify the stronger units of an army, just look at the unit card and this little symbol. The tier symbol will tell you if it's tier 3 or above, you're probably good to use it on that, tier 3, 4, 5. Anything below, it might be a little bit of a waste of magic because you're not really getting that much return. So not the most powerful, but simple and reliable. Much like your peen. Okay, enfeebling foe next. Minus 24 melee defense, minus 24 melee attack, only 6 winds of magic for 17 seconds. This is one of the best spells in the lore book for its cheap cost and its big effect. Minus 24 melee defense is going to make most units take a lot of extra damage whilst limiting their damage potential with the melee attack debuff. And what's more, for 10 winds of magic you can overcast it to double the duration to 34 seconds. Definitely something to consider if you're using this on an important enemy target, which is why I personally like this spell for using against lords and heroes if your lord or hero is fighting an enemy one, because it's going to help to protect your lord or hero from damage whilst allowing you more chance to do your damage to the enemy. And if you can get that going for 34 seconds, that's going to hopefully equate to a few extra hits that you may not have gotten otherwise. But this is a great spell for turning a losing fight into a winning one. For example, with these cold ones here against Blood Knights. Blood Knights would naturally win this fight. They are the better cavalry, but being debuffed by 27 melee defense and 27 melee attack, because this is buffed up by Lizardmen Intensity, that's going to mean the Blood Knights are taking way more damage from these cold one spear riders who do have armor piercing and anti-large themselves, so they're now going to be very good at taking down Blood Knights. So yeah, to make the most of this spell, any situation where you can see a powerful, stronger enemy unit taking on one of your units that is reasonably capable of doing some damage, drop this on them. It'll help them do more damage and really hurt that enemy unit. So similarly to the previous spell, it's pretty easy to use, pretty reliable. It's always going to do its job with a little more timing though, because obviously if a unit runs away and you can't attack it, then this spell is going to waste. The only way to really waste this spell though is if you just use it on crappy units or to support crappy units. Use this to support your better, stronger units like mid-tier above. ones that can actually do damage and take advantage of the enemy's lack of melee defense. So just look out for those situations or your Lord on Lord single entity action. And then we have the Withering. This will reduce enemy leadership by 8 and more importantly armor by 30. Again, only 6 winds of magic, and it does last a pretty chunky 40 seconds. Only on a single target though, unless you overcast it to turn it into an area, although it does double the magic cost. So a good one to use largely for the armor debuff. You can use it on units that only have 30 armor to give them 0 armor like these Plague Bearers, or units that have reasonably high armor like the Forsaken. 85 armor, we can turn that to 55, but if you start to get up into really high armor like the Chosen here with 120 armor, putting them down to 90 armor isn't really going to have that great of an effect because 90 is still a lot of armor and has a good chance of blocking that base damage. Again though, this could be a great one for casting on Lords and Heroes to make them a little more vulnerable if they don't have tons of armor. It could also be nicely doubled up in this situation with enfeebling foe as well. That way you're reducing the melee defense, reducing the armor, increasing that chance of damage against the enemy. Worth it for those more powerful targets or Lords. And if you want to make use of that leadership debuff as well, use it when a unit is kind of on the way out in its last kind of third or quarter of health, because then they'll likely be low on leadership and that extra -8 could come in handy to get rid of a unit a little sooner. Do remember as well though that this spell is only really going to be helpful for your units that don't have armor piercing damage. If they do have armor piercing damage like these Skin Wolves here, well their armor piercing damage is ignoring the 30 armor anyway. So the Skin Wolves are only doing a little bit extra base damage without that 30 armor there. So look for your stronger non-armor piercing units and support them with this spell by casting it on whatever they're fighting to allow them to do some extra damage, provided the enemy doesn't have a ton of armor. Maybe like 80 or less. Anything more than that might be a little bit of a waste. In some situations though, if you've just got a crowd of enemies, you can cast the overcast version to hit the area and maybe not worry too much about if it's being perfectly optimal, especially if it's late in the battle where that 8 leadership might be able to make a bit of a difference. Overall, a good spell for getting some extra damage out of your base damage units, not so much use for helping your armor-piercing units though. Next, a good old classic in Penumbral Pendulum. 12 winds of magic, so not cheap. This is a wind spell, so just damage in a straight line. 50% armor piercing, can be upgraded for 16 winds of magic, increasing the damage output overall, a little bit more AP. So with this one, we're looking for those straight lines of infantry primarily. You can usually get a pretty solid hit on at least 3 units. Although in this case, Dwarf's not the best target for this spell as they have a 25% spell resistance, but even so, you can see it still does a fair bit of damage to these 3 units of Longbeards. So this is a very simple spell to use, just line it up and let it do its damage, most easily on lines of infantry like front lines, but wherever you can find just a long line of troops or enemies, this can be useful even against cavalry if they're quite tightly packed. And honestly, this is the difficult thing about this spell. Other than right at the start of the battle where front lines will typically meet, after that it can be difficult to find a good place to use this spell to make the most of it. If you're on higher difficulties, I wouldn't try using it on any stationary units that aren't kind of in combat because it's very easy for them to dodge. And naturally, any kind of choke point where enemies get all blobbed up or in sieges and minor settlements, this spell can be great there. It's just about landing it on a line of enemies that's long enough to take the full brunt of it. In terms of the armor-piercing damage of this spell, it says 50%, but against 3 different armored types of units here, we've got Chaos Marauders, Forsaken, and Chosen. Very different in the armor. Marauders, of course, taking the most damage with the least armor, nearly a third of their health gone. Forsaken with 85 armor, only about maybe a fifth of their health gone. And Chosen, maybe only like an eighth. So naturally, the less armor something has, the better this spell is going to do. If you are going to be hitting some more heavily armored stuff, I'd go for that overcast version. Otherwise, you're probably fine with the normal version. It's likely you'll be hitting different types of units with this spell rather than 3 of the same. So I wouldn't worry too much about what you're hitting. As long as it's not Peasant Mob, you'll probably still get some decent value out of it. You can kind of set the enemy up for this spell if you have a nice straight front line and maybe don't even charge the enemy just so your line stays nice and straight. A good solid and reliable damage dealing spell though if you can find or create the good opportunities to use it. Next, Okkham's mindrazor. Quite simply, a big damage boost plus magical attacks, which may or may not be useful, but can be used for that reason. Only costs 8 winds of magic, 14 for the overcast version, turning it into an area. Lasts 32 seconds. This is quite simply the kind of spell that can either maybe potentially make your unit win a fight they're going to lose, or win a fight they're going to win just faster. It's worth thinking about the units that you're putting it on though, and mainly you want to aim for those more higher damage output units because you're gonna see more of a return. For example, if you put it on Skink Cohort, they have 25 weapon strength, plus 50%, that takes them to a whopping 40 weapon strength, which is a good weapon strength, but as you can see, Ockham's mindrazor only causing 14 extra damage. Not much, right? Whereas if you slap it on something with a much bigger weapon strength, like Croxagors with their 100 weapon strength, well now that plus 50% weapon strength and Lizardmen magic intensity bonus adds 58 extra damage from Ockham's mindrazor, so much more than the 14 of the Skink cohort, right? So more damage to be done, the better a unit you use it on. Which of course means it's pretty good for single entities as well, lords and heroes. Putting it on Throg here, this gives them an extra 260 weapon strength. Very handy when fighting a beefcake like Skarbrand. Also, the imbued magic attacks is going to come in handy in this situation because Skarbrand is a demon, he has a 20% physical resistance, so the magic imbuement is taking that away and allowing Throg to do even more damage. So reserving this for your more powerful units is a good way to go, and saving it for when they fight a strong enemy unit that you want to take out or take out quickly. Like here, using it on Haganeth Executioners fighting Streltsy. No, they don't need the buff to win the fight, but they'll be able to kill this unit faster, meaning they won't die as much and they can get on and fight someone else quicker. Or if you manage to pin an enemy unit in a bad situation, like here with these horned ones on Manfred, we can help them get a nice bit of extra damage in, buffing them up with Ockham's mindrazor. If you get a few of your stronger units in one place, you could use the overcast version to hit all of them and just help them with whatever they're fighting at the time, buffing up these halberdiers here as they fight the Summoners of Rage and also Karl. He's getting that damage boost, and that imbuement of magical attacks is also very handy to keep in mind whenever you deal with ethereal units like Vampire Cairn Wraiths or Hex Wraiths. Syrenes are the Vampire Coast. These units have a big physical resistance, and the imbuement of magical attacks will take that away. So drop this on your unit if you're fighting some Hex Wraiths or something. Even if your unit isn't that great of a unit, it can still do a lot of extra damage, taking away that physical resistance. So lots of good ways to use this spell to churn out some extra damage. And lastly, the big old Pit of Shades. This is a vortex spell, 100% armor piercing damage. It is a stationary spell as well, so you don't have to worry about it moving around and missing. It is pretty expensive though at 15 winds of magic. Overcasting it to a cracking 22 winds of magic makes it even more expensive and increases the armor piercing damage, even though it's already at 100%. Basically just increases the damage. It's the kind of spell where quite simply you want to fill up that circle with as many enemies as you can and just let it go to town. You can drop it on your own lords and heroes' heads as well. It doesn't really hurt single entities very much, or monstrous infantry, more cavalry and mainly infantry. So again, like the pendulum spell, you just want to look out for the good opportunities to use this. If you can see a couple of mid-tier plus units all just clumped up together, drop this on their faces and absolutely ruin their lives. And because it's 100% armor piercing, you don't have to worry about whether the enemy is heavily armored or not. You can just drop it on any of the most expensive units all clumped up that you can find, and it's going to do some great work for you. If you do manage to find like 3 expensive units all blobbed up together, or if you could use a lord or hero to make that happen, drop this on them, go for the overcast version, get that extra damage, it's going to pay off. Or once again, choke point opportunities where things are blobbed up and you got 3 or 4 or 5 units all in a tight little space. This spell will do absolute wonders. So again, very simple to use, very powerful, very expensive, but as long as you just wait for the good opportunities to use it and don't try to use it on moving targets or anything, you're guaranteed to get some good returns. But there we go. All the spells in the Lore of Shadows and how to use them. If you want more of this stuff, I got a playlist right here. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, I got Patreon and YouTube memberships. Do check them out if you wish. Otherwise, I'll see you in the future.